This is just a sample of the audiobook. To get the complete audiobook, access the link posted in the first comment.
She supposedly acquired her cottage on St. Anne Street by extricating a client from the clutches of the law. It is claimed that she led the voodoo dances in Congo Square and the orgiastic St. John's Eve ceremonies on the shores of Lake Pontchartrain, kept a gigantic snake named Grand Zombi, and procured young women of color for white men at an infamous house of assignation. On the other hand, we hear of her devotion to the Roman Catholic Church, her kindness and charity, her nursing of yellow fever victims and ministry to condemned prisoners, her anti-slavery activism, and her leadership in the struggle by women of African descent against the hierarchy of white men. The legend tells us that Marie Laveau was the daughter of a wealthy white planter and his beautiful mulatto mistress, that she was married first to Jacques Paris and then to Christophe Glapillon, and that she was the mother of 15 children. She's said to have been nearly 100 years old at the time of her death in 1881. As she aged, one of her daughters, known as Marie II, is supposed to have secretly taken her place, giving the impression that the Queen of the Voodoos reigned, perpetually beautiful until the end of the 19th century. Standing before the tomb of Marie Laveau, the curious visitor is moved to question just whose bones are interred here, and why, more than a century after her death, she has become an internationally renowned cult figure. Looking for answers, I read everything available on the famous priestess. Although a great deal had been written, I found nothing of substance. Finally, in 1995, I decided to undertake this project myself. I began my research with reports and interviews submitted in the late 1930s and early 1940s by the Louisiana Writers Project, LWP. The LWP was a local branch of the Federal Writers Project, created during the Great Depression under the auspices of the Works Projects Administration to provide employment for journalists, creative writers, and other white-collar workers. Under the leadership of Project Director Lyle Saxon, LWP field workers made the first serious attempt to uncover the true story of Marie Laveau. They located and transcribed civil and ecclesiastical records relating to Marie, her family, and her associates, translating those written in French or Spanish into English. They made typed copies of 19th century newspaper articles on voodoo and compiled a bibliography of hundreds of others. Most significantly, LWP fieldworkers interviewed 70 mostly black New Orleans, born between 1853 and 1878, who remembered the famous Voudou Priestess or her successor. 47 of the interviews were of sufficient substance to be usable in this study. These informants are listed in the appendix with date of birth, if known, address, association with Marie Laveau, and category of information provided. The interviews vary considerably in quality. These elderly people were recalling events 50 to 60 years past. They sometimes contradicted each other or even contradicted themselves. They held widely divergent opinions of Marie Laveau's character. The Writers Project fieldworkers did not have the use of sound recording equipment, but took notes and wrote their reports from memory. Many of the informants spoke Louisiana Creole as their first language, and their English might have been difficult for the LWP workers to understand. Some errors undoubtedly crept in due to the interview methods. The best of the interviews, nevertheless, have a definite ring of authenticity. The descriptions of voodoo ceremonies can be correlated with newspaper reports and other printed sources, and information about Marie Laveau's extended family is substantiated by archival evidence. In 1940, Writers Project employee Catherine Dillon drew upon the archival documents, newspaper stories, and interviews collected by LWP fieldworkers to produce a 700-page voodoo manuscript. In the most important chapters, Marie the Great and Marie the Mysterious, Dillon interpreted these primary sources to create a narrative of the original Marie Laveau and her successor. Another book-length manuscript, A History of African Americans in Louisiana, was compiled by researcher Marcus Christian, director of the LWP's Negro Unit at Dillard University. Christian's chapter on voodooism and mumbo-jumbo was based primarily on newspaper articles and other printed accounts. The Louisiana Writers Project, along with other Works Projects administration programs, was abruptly shut down in 1943 after the United States entered World War II. Most of this valuable data remains unpublished and is not readily accessible to the general public. The greater part of the LWP collection, including Dillon's Voodoo manuscript, resides in the Kemi G. Henry Research Center.